Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 149 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Dr. Linda Shanti McCabe for this episode. And we have not yet tackled the topic of art and how it can help with grief on the show before. So I was excited to talk with Linda about that, as well as her program called The Art of Grief, which is starting soon. Linda is a widowed parent herself, and she is also a licensed clinical psychologist. Listen to as she shares the major change she made shortly after her husband's death and what she's planning to do as her son prepares for his 13th birthday. So before we jump into my discussion with Linda, I wanted to let you guys know the latest from here. First, I wanted to read you a portion of an email that I got from someone who bought my latest book, Widowed Parents Unite, 52 Tips to Get Through the First Year from One Widowed Parent to Another. It was the best email, and the person who sent it is not a widowed parent herself, but she had bought this book as a gift for her neighbor. The neighbor's wife had died suddenly, leaving him with 2 teenagers. And this person who wrote to me doesn't, I think, really know the neighbor, but bought the book for him as a gift and dropped it on his porch. So recently she ran into him while dog walking, and this is part of her email to me. Tom rolled down his window and looked at me and said, "Are you the one who gave me that book?" He seemed close to tears. I said yes. He said, "Thank you. It's the only book that's helping me right now. I pick it up when I need to and read a couple of chapters, and it makes me feel better." So this is exactly why I wanted to write this book, and it's exactly why I'm so grateful that the 48 contributing authors wrote such thoughtful pieces for it. I mean, this is the type of reader experience that I was hoping for with this whole thing. When he said, "I pick it up when I need to and read a couple chapters, and it makes me feel better." So if you haven't yet picked up a copy of Widowed Parents Unite, you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or you can ask for it wherever you like to buy your books. And also, we are slowly starting to publish pieces over at our website, widowedparentinstitute.com. This week's essay is by this week's guest, and it's about how Linda attempted to raise butterflies in anticipation of the first anniversary of her husband's death. So check that out as well. All right, that's all the news from here. Let's get on with the show. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Dr. Linda Shanti McCabe. Linda is a licensed clinical psychologist, a registered expressive arts therapist, a certified grief counselor, and a licensed soul collage facilitator. She worked in eating disorder recovery programs for over a decade before opening a private practice in 2009. Linda is also a widowed parent and is the author of After Your Person Dies, Affirmations for Traveling with Grief, Making Meaning, and Going On, which she wrote after her husband died in 2019. She's joining us today from upstate New York. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, I've really been looking forward to speaking with you. We haven't really dived into the topic of art and its relationship to grief and potential for grief and grieving people yet. So this is really going to be great. And I'm looking forward to diving into your story as well and your expertise, and just been looking forward to this. So without further ado, your book starts out, quote, "Nothing in my doctorate program in psychology prepared me for the land of grief." So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that. That's and right. I guess maybe first, how did you wind up in this grief world at all?
Like how most of us land, which is through my person dying, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, my husband died of pancreatic cancer, and my dad died 3 months before my husband died. And I've actually had several more people die since then. It happens to all of us.
It does.
But I think we're not really prepared in the culture we live in for that to happen.
And even though, as you say, you had a not just any old degree, but a doctorate in clinical psychology. So what's up with that?
I know. What is up with that? And I'm not going to throw my school under the bus because it's a great school. But yeah, what is up with that?
Yeah.
What is up with that?
Yeah, because I think that people who are sort of lay people, for lack of a better word, think, all right, well, if you're anywhere in that mental health space, you must know everything there is to know about grief.
No. And I, like most lay people, my association with grief and grief work was the 5 stages of grief, right? Which people get down on them and they're like, a bunch of, put a swear word in here. I don't know if we can have swear words.
Well, we try to keep our iTunes read. We don't want to get dinged by iTunes, so we try to keep it pretty clean.
Okay, great. And I'm guessing that a lot of people listening are parents too. So
yeah,
without another parent to watch the kids while they're listening to the podcast.
Kids on in the background while you're driving or something. Yeah,
yeah. I think they're relevant. But what I heard in a grief course is that the 5 stages are descriptive, not prescriptive. I thought, that makes so much sense.
Okay, right? So tell us more about that then.
Right? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, right? Like, I think most people traveling with grief can identify with those experiences, right? Like denial, this can't be happening. This isn't happening. This didn't happen, and the bargaining, like, please not, my person, can they just have more time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so it describes the experience, but it just doesn't, it's not a linear journey. It's not like, okay, I've completed bargaining and I will never go back there, I've gone through depression and I am now in the land of acceptance forevermore. The end, I've moved on,
right.
Like,
as if there's some
like that.
Yeah, as if there's some way you could measure your progress on a yardstick or something. And I've gotten through 3 out of 5 stages, so I must be, what is that, 60% of the way there.
Yeah, and there's an arrival point where it ends. David Kessler wrote a book, the sixth stage of grief.
Yeah,
Finding Meaning.
Finding Meaning, the 6th stage of grief. I'll put a link in the show notes to that.
Okay. And when I did one of these paintings for the book, the one with the faces, I kind of loosely was thinking about those experiences as I was painting them.
Oh. Tell us more about that.
So the last one with the butterfly.
And so listeners can't see now. I can see on your wall behind you, there is a large painting and let's see, 1, 2, are there 6 people in there or 5 people in there? A little hard to see from the distance. And I noticed that that painting is echoed in your book as well. So maybe you can tell us about some of that.
So in the book, the affirmations go along with the different faces and describe those experiences of denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, depression, and finding meaning. I'm very I've gotten really into post-traumatic growth since entering the land of grief, and not post-traumatic growth like you become a butterfly and then you're a butterfly forevermore at the end, but post-traumatic growth, like it's kind of like when you become a parent, like when you like after you give birth, your stomach's never going to be the same. There's no bouncing back. But you are transformed as a result of the experience. So that's kind of what I look at, like, as the post-traumatic growth aspect of that butterfly, for lack of a way of putting it. Like it changes you. Your person dying changes you, and if you kind of go, if you don't resist the pain of that, then amazing things can come from, like, one of the aspects of post-traumatic growth is increased appreciation of life, or a richer spiritual or existential life. I think so many of us just sort of naturally go into that without even realizing it. because we're changed as a result of our person dying.
You said I thought I had made a note here. There was a line in your book. It was something like, grief changes you, or loss changes you, and go with it, or let it, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds maybe like what you're getting at a little bit here.
Yeah. Because I think it's so, I mean, obviously it's so painful. It's like the most painful thing. And resisting the pain can be more painful than just allowing the pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like all those things that a grief illiterate culture tells us about, like, at 1 year, you should be moved on. And here's what that looks like, you know, like, and it's so painful. And we tell that to ourselves. And then it's so much more painful rather than, oh, I'm in a lot of pain right now. You know, like I miss today.
Right. Yeah, I'm noticing here from your book, quote, like many people who haven't traveled with grief, I thought grief was a very sad, scary place that you visited for a few months, or maybe a year if you were going slow, and then moved on. I thought it would be linear, follow stages, and then be complete. And so I'm guessing you're telling us that is not what you found. And I assume most of the people that you've talked to and work with also.
Yeah, you learn to integrate it into a new way of being. Yeah, that never changes. I mean, it changes. You change with it.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about moving on versus moving forward, or I think maybe even just plain moving. Can you tell us, unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. Well, and I've also, I've been thinking about, I have a son, and, I'm guessing a lot of people listening have a kid or kids, right? And your person has died. And, as you move forward without one of the parents, even if, some people remarry, some people don't, but it's still, their parent is gone, that's, and as, so my son he's going to turn 13 soon. And as he sort of approaches becoming a man, it's acute, the loss of his dad, in some ways more so when his dad died, because where's the model of here's what you look like when you're older, where's the mentoring of, it's and as he goes through, as the kid, as the kid or the kids go through all their milestones of their life, it becomes clear, especially with, things that are associated with that parent, like maybe coaching the sports team, or graduating for accomplishing this, or it becomes more clear that this person is not there. And you have to navigate, like, how to, like, I'm going to create a rite of passage for him because of this. Maybe, and who knows, maybe I wouldn't have done that if my husband was here.
Interesting. So a rite of passage, you mean for what sorts of things? What are you thinking about?
For my son, because he's turning 13, and like you are starting to enter this phase of your life where you're becoming a man. And I'm going to invite the village in, especially because there's this, absence of the dad. So I'm going to invite the village in terms of, like, giving him advice if they were to speak to their 13-year-old self. What would they say, and my husband's old men's group, I'm going to have them, like, what would they say to my son, and what do they think Jonathan, my husband, would have said? And are they gonna like stand up verbally in a circle and do it, or send them letters, or like, how do you, I'm just thinking, like, if people are, thinking about doing something like this, I'm curious how you're thinking about putting it together. Well, this is literally, like, I'm literally, like, doing it. So I'll tell you afterwards. I'm creating it as I go.
All right. Sounds good. Sounds good.
It's going to be video, since we moved. I mean, that's one of the other pieces of we moved after my husband died. So a lot of the community that we had when my husband was here is back in California.
Oh,
And we are
okay,
now
gotcha.
in New York.
Gotcha. Okay. You know, I'd love to hear more about this after you do it. Maybe we can circle back on it sometime later. When's your son turning 13?
Next month.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, happy birthday to him. How old was he when his dad died?
He was 8.
8. Okay. All right. So my kids were 9 and 11, so similar.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that your husband died of, I think it was pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
So was he sick for a while then?
It was about 9 months.
Okay. Hospice and all the stuff, like
Hospice and all that stuff. Yeah. It was, yeah, it was fast. I mean, it's all relative, right? You know, different cancers are different. I've heard worse and better in terms of timelines, but yeah, it's pretty fast. Lots of surgeries, lots of chemo.
Gosh, we have a lot in common. I think my husband was sick with, it was brain cancer, but it was 8 months and hospice and lots of surgeries and lots of complications and in and out of the hospital and the skilled nursing facilities and, you know, all the things. So it's a tricky time too to start thinking about, I mean, because you're parenting during that time as well. And I don't know if in your case, in my case, it was pretty clear that it was terminal because the type of brain cancer he had is very, very small survival rate. But it's like you're starting widowed parenting before you're actually widowed parenting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're definitely solo parenting. I think it took me a while to come into like even using the W word and seeing that was going to happen, you know. Yeah. But yeah, you're solo parenting before they die.
And there's the whole anticipatory grief question, which was one of these terms I'd never heard before. But of course, learned it along the way here. But one of the things that was surprising and interesting to me was that a lot of times kids don't necessarily, like, for various reasons, they might not understand that the person is going to die. Like,
yeah.
For example, it never occurred to me, you know, when you talk to adults and you say someone's going on hospice, people know, okay, that means they're going to die. And it might be, you know, a day or a week or a few months, but we're reaching the end here and we're stopping treatment. But it never occurred to me that with kids who don't have the life experience, you know, they don't necessarily know what hospice, what that word means. And they just know, well, there's different people coming now, but they've had doctors and nurses and medical people involved all along. And it never occurred to me to stop and explain, like, this is what hospice means.
Yeah. Yeah. We did have that conversation. But only because I was, you know, very anxiously researching at the time, like how to talk to kids about when a parent is sick and or going to die, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I should back up and say I did, you know, they asked me early on if the doctors were going to be able to fix it. And I told them the truth that they weren't, but that was way before the hospice thing came up. Like hospice was still a few months away. And so like when that actually came up, it never occurred to me to like circle back and be like, okay, this is what this means.
Right. So, yeah. That's interesting. Cause that I never thought of that. And I don't remember that piece of our story in terms of, you know, once hospice was involved, whether that was the time that I had the discussion that, you know, he is going to die or if it was before or after that. I don't remember. But yeah, most adults will be like, oh, that's what hospice means.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even have to explain it. You just say, we've called hospice, and then people get it. Adults get it.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you moved, that you had been in California, I think you said, and now you're in upstate New York. Can you tell us a little more about how that came about?
Sure. So my husband and I, we lived in San Francisco.
Not so far from me. Well, I guess. Same coast anyway.
That's what I was thinking. Oh, Seattle, it's a nice place.
Yeah.
We were there for, you know, we were both there since 1997. We were there for a long time. And he was a Brit. So he wanted to go see his family, once we were towards the end. So we actually went back to England before he died. We didn't know how much time we had. And actually, by the time we got there, we didn't have that much time at all. It was like between 2 and 3 weeks. But as we were preparing to go to England, we had started talking about selling the house. And my husband, if he was going to live longer, wanted to live in England. So that was our plan. Didn't end up, having the time to do that. So then after he died, I had to make a decision about we were already selling the house. Okay, where am I gonna go? Where am I gonna create a new life for my son and I? And even though I'm a very heart-centered, like visionary person, when push comes to shove, I can be very pragmatic. So I was like, okay, we are going back to upstate New York where my family is because the cost of living is great. My family is there. That's where we're going.
Oh, so you're back now in your hometown where your family is?
Right nearby. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm in the same town as my sister and next to the town where my mom lives.
Okay, gotcha. Well, upstate New York is lovely. It's been a few years since I've been there, but my grandfather grew up there, so it's it's neat. A lot of snow though. I don't know if I could
a lot of snow
handle that.
Although not so much nowadays.
Yeah, and you guys probably have better plowing than we have here. We get an inch of snow and like the whole city shut down.
Yes. No, we've got the plowing thing down. I went to my son had an orchestra concert last night, and it was a snowstorm on the way. By the time we came out of the concert, like 45 minutes, everything was plowed.
Nice. No, here it would have been shut down. Yeah,
you're sleeping at the school.
Exactly. All right. Well, so this is interesting though. It sounds like you moved then fairly soon after he died. And of course, you've probably heard, I've certainly heard, it's sort of common advice, don't make any major changes in the first year. And like most sort of conventional wisdom, I think that probably has pluses and minuses. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, particularly in light of, it sounds like you made at least one major change in that first year, if not in the first, I don't know, a couple months.
Yeah. No, it was couple of weeks after he died. That's when I moved us because our house in San Francisco was already on the market. Right. So had to go somewhere.
Yeah, the balls were in motion.
Yep. And even when he was sick, we were looking at that. And of course, if I had my psychologist hat on, I'd be like, let's look at this. Let's think about this. And I do have very wise family members and friends that were having those conversations with me. This made the most sense. This just made the most sense. So, I mean, people say that about dating too, right? Like don't date for, whatever, this amount of time. I'm not going to put that amount of time because I think the thing with becoming a widow and grief is once you're in that journey, you realize how individual it is. And you realize that until you're in those shoes, you have no idea what it's actually like, So, I mean, I think it could work. I mean, it can work. And I would say, I think the caution is, if I put my like therapist hat back on, is that you don't want to do it to run away. You want to do it to move toward the life you want. You don't want it you don't want to do it to run away from the grief. Right? So if you're dating or moving or, going back to school or blah, 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 to run away from the grief, then it will catch up with you and bite you in the butt. But if you're making a change from a, post-traumatic growth, kind of like, this is moving towards the life I want to create now, then, and integrating, your grief experience and making new meaning from it, then it's a wise move.
Okay. So that sounds like an important distinction. And I wonder, how is someone supposed to know if they're running away or moving toward?
Right. I mean, I think that's the thing. I think sometimes we know and sometimes we don't, to be totally honest, And also maybe sometimes it's some of both.
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, that's where support can really help with, like giving you, like you can't kiss your own ear. So, getting, running those things by a safe, trusted person, not just anyone, but, your therapist or another maybe widowed person further along that you trust and respect, or, those kinds of people.
Sure.
Then, you can kind of listen to their feedback and integrate what's helpful and leave what's not helpful.
Sure.
And I also think, if you do something like, let's say you go back to school. Here, I have some examples from my own experience. So I moved to New York. I thought it would be easy. I'm licensed as a psychologist in California. I thought it would be easy, and a colleague and I looked this up. It'd be so easy to just transfer my license to New York State. It was not easy.
Really?
New York State said, nope, you have to get another doctorate degree.
What?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Right? That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I did not get licensed in New York.
Do your PhD all over again?
Yes.
That's crazy.
I know.
You'd think in a time when we need more mental health practitioners rather than fewer mental health practitioners, that somebody who's already has a PhD and a license, they ought to figure out a way to make it work.
And more experience than is required in New York. It's ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And the pandemic was going on. It's just so ridiculous that they were throwing up these obstacles.
Huh.
But so that was like, once I got over the experiences of anger stage of grief around that. I think I actually swore at the New York State person on the phone, and I'm not really like a impolite person in general, but I was just like it was such a huge secondary loss. I was like, are you effing kidding me?
Sure.
So after that, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? Like I could get another degree if I wanted to, like that's an option. I could change careers. I could, how can I work with the career I have? So what I did was I pivoted, and I got, my REAT, which is Registered Expressive Arts Therapist, and I got certified in grief counseling. Okay. And now I see clients individually because I am still licensed in California. So I see clients virtually in California for therapy. Okay. And then I see people, primarily widows, but people that are traveling with grief in other places through my expressive arts program, and that's coaching. So that's how but back to your question about how do you know, right? How do you know? If I had started this grief certification process or this expressive arts training process, and I had discovered, oh my God, I'm really not interested in this at all. I thought I was, but it's just, no, this is not what I want to be doing. Then I think it's okay to pivot. Like what have you lost other than maybe you've lost some time and money? Which, could be significant, but like, that's not a problem. Now, right. That's not the direction I want to go. Okay. What direction? What did I learn here? Oh, well, actually, maybe for example, with the REAT thing, maybe I want to be making art, but I don't want to facilitate it for other people. Okay. Well, maybe I want to pivot towards a degree in fine art. Now I know. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't started off over here, right? That's sort of the post-traumatic growth aspect of there are no mistakes here. Like if you don't know, it's okay to move forward in one direction until either this is the direction I want to go or this is not the direction I want to go.
Gotcha. So not putting pressure on yourself to I have to figure everything out with 100% certainty before I take one step in some direction.
Right, because that just paralyzes you, which I think a lot of people in grief can feel like that, especially widows. Like, my whole world is gone. Like, I don't know. And then you can get stuck in I don't know for a long time.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, on this art thing, I'm interested in exploring this more. In the book I noticed you mentioned lots of different things you did in terms of grief support. And then you said, but mostly I painted. So many paintings emerged that first year. Painting brought me peace. art expressed things that I couldn't in other ways. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. I think, I've always gravitated towards art naturally. Like I was the kid in grade school, like drawing,
Huh.
drawing in the corner. So I think I just intuitively discovered like, oh, this is the place to go. I think this is where like not seeing grief as a pathology, but seeing people as naturally resilient, like comes in. Because if you listen to yourself, you're going to grieve in the way that you need to. If you need to write, you're going to start journaling. If you need to get it out creatively, you're going to start painting. If you're an introvert, you're going to, you're not going to be going on the radio, shouting from the rooftop, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be, much more protective of your time and space and need to be in the cave. If you're an extrovert, then you're going to be going to a lot of grief groups. Like, so for me, that was the place. That was especially because I didn't have my community nearby anymore.
Right.
So, and also grief, again, not to harp on this, but we just don't live in a grief literate culture, so it was just so hard to like, especially being in a new place, to meet people and like, oh, why'd you move here? Well, like I could say because my husband died, I could say because my family's here, but like it's going to be an awkward conversation, and then they're going to say, oh, whatever you need, like just let me know, and I'm not going to let you know. I just met you,
But then you have to be nice, right? And say, oh, thank you, I appreciate
draining.
that, knowing that you're not going to call, right?
Right. Yeah. Making like comforting them to feel better. Because
yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting,
so art was a place I could just bleh.
Yeah. Huh. Well, so it sounds like you have a affinity for art, certainly, and a talent. I mean, I see the beautiful pictures and paintings in your book here. But is this art and grief stuff like just for people who have affinity and talent for art, or what about people like me, like I can't draw my way out of a paper bag? And I have great appreciation because I watch what my daughter does, and she like, and I'm always like, how do you do that, right? Like, so I don't know, would I be hopeless at the idea of considering doing something with art and grief?
No. Thank you. This is the area where I have so much passion.
Okay, all right. So tell us,
especially for facilitating, expressing the art of grief, because I am not really a fine art person. I've never been trained in fine art, and I will own I have a natural affinity, and I do think that that's true for some people. Like you put me on a baseball field, and I'm not going to be so great, as my son knows. But you put in a room full of paints and collage supplies, and I am in heaven. So there is a natural, I don't mean to discount that. People have their natural like affinities. And when I facilitate expressive arts, it is for anyone, which is why I use things like collage. Because collage, I mean, how does that feel to you? Like most people, when they hear like we're going to paint today versus we're going to collage, if I say we're going to paint, they might like get really anxious. But if I say we're going to collage, they might be like a little more curious.
The barriers feel lower.
Yeah. And the kind of art that you make in expressive arts is not about the product.
What is it about?
It is about, I think of it like, so like, for example, with soul collage is this process of, I'm really wanting to hold some up, but this is an audio medium. Okay. So I will describe. It's a process of making 5x7 cards, a deck of 5x7 cards that are collaged.
Okay.
And each card, it's kind of like making your own personal tarot deck, but it's not tarot. Each card represents one aspect of yourself. And there's no words, it's just images. So you could make a card for the part of you that feels lonely. You can make a card for the part of you that feels consumed with grief. You could make a card for the part of you that feels like you're not an artist. There, you could make a card for the part of you that like doesn't know, like is living the question, like, I don't know where my life is going. Like, what does my future look like now? You could make a card for, and then there's different suits, like in a deck of cards, there's ace of spades. There's different suits in the soul collage deck. So there's a suit for your animal guides. There's a suit for the parts of your personality. So those are the parts I was just describing a minute ago. There's a suit for the archetypes, and there's a suit for people that have made a significant influence in your life. So like your person, you can make a card for your person. And then you can use these cards, like you turn them face down, a whole bunch of them, and you can ask a life question. Like, I need guidance regarding how to guide my son in turning 13 without his dad being here, and then I could pick a card and see what it says to me. And in a way, it bypasses like all the linear, critical, executive function sort of frontal parts of your brain, and it sort of comes from that more pre-verbal, deeper wisdom place of yourself.
Interesting. And so this is like, if somebody wanted to do this, like you help with this, or like, how do you start?
This is one of the things that we do in the Art of Grief program that I run for widows. We do soul collage, we do altered books, where you take a book and you literally alter it, which I love because it's such a great metaphor for, like, you thought the story was going to go this way, but it didn't. So we got halfway through the book, and now you are going to create a new ending.
Which is a parallel, like, for your
middle.
life here, right? Like, you thought your life was going to go a certain way. And that is very true. It's like, it's not, obviously nobody thinks they know exactly how their life is going to be for the next 50 years, whatever, but you have a sense directionally, or some basic assumptions built in, right? And then when someone, your husband or your wife, dies, it just shatters those basic assumptions of how you thought your life was going to unfold.
Right.
So you're saying you can, this altered book idea helps somehow you reimagine that?
Yeah. Okay. I love it when like people that don't consider themselves creative are like trying to like
get their head around.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's what it's like. And you don't have this, like, grief feels very disorienting, right? You're like, I thought I knew the story. I had this assumptive world. This is, these are my people. These are my main attachment people. We're going to live here. We're going to retire. We're going to travel.
Right.
And then you go along and then, oh, wait a minute. We're not retiring together. Now what?
Right.
Am I still going to travel? What's my son's graduation going to look like? What's my career? What's my, and you can, if you put it in a more like playful, for lack of a better way of putting it, because it's so heavy, and it's so hard. If you can put it into like altering a book, like you can rip pages out of the book, you can collage, you can scratch out all the words you don't like and circle the words you do like to make a new poem. It just sort of turns on another part of your brain, so you can start to like kind of find your internal compass.
I see. Interesting. I mean, I see. I sort of do. It sounds like, and so you mentioned that you have this program called The Art of Grief. Oh, you're holding this up. Okay, so I'm going to describe this for people who can't see it, obviously. There's a book, and it looks like you've altered the cover as well before we even open it. You've put some collage and colors. Okay, and on the inside, you've glued stuff right on over the words. You've glued some images, some like colors, and I think there was a bird there. Okay, on this page, you've drawn with purples and pinks and big, bold, like I can't see actually any of the words I think that are typed on there. Maybe I see a few through the, oh yeah, you left a few, is an artist and arts, but you scribbled out a bunch of others, and then you added some words yourself. Widowed mom. Okay. Aha. Now these look like probably magazine pictures, maybe some kind of photos that you've collaged onto these pages. Can I ask, what was this book originally?
This was actually so when you choose choose a book to alter, you can choose one, that you don't, because it's such a heretical, is that how you say that word? Heretical?
Heretical? A heresy.
Thing
It's a heresy.
To take a book and change it, mess it up.
Right.
I'm a total book lover, so I'm like, but it's fun, right? So, but if that's too much of a leap for you to consider damaging a book, then you could pick a book that you really don't like. So you can, but if you could also pick either, I've had people pick using a kid's book because maybe they don't consider themselves an artist and they like the illustrations in the book. And then they just want to change the words and write a new story in the book.
Interesting. Okay, that's an interesting idea.
This one was, or is still partly, a book about using art with grief. But it's like it's more of a clinical book. And so I thought it was way too clinical. So I collaged over it.
That sounds like, oh, look at that. Yeah. And so you've drawn a big, is that like the rock that Sisyphus pushes up the hill or something?
Yeah, this was an exercise that we did in the group, which is what did your relationship with grief used to look like? What does it look like now? And what is it becoming? So this was like grief is a boulder.
Gotcha.
And then I am learning to carry grief with grace.
Okay. And there's a picture of a human type figure carrying something. And now here it looks like flowers and leaves and handwriting and maybe there's watercolors or something on the pages. It's a little hard for me to tell over the screen.
I used it's like it's a bunch of stuff. It's collage, it's pastel, which are oil pastel, which is kind of like crayons, sort of.
Gotcha. Okay.
And and little sketch marks saying life is beautiful and hard and uncertain. Keep dancing.
Oh. Well, it sounds to me for your own book here, that's a beautiful metaphor or something to use this clinical book on grief and modify it in ways that feel real and personal and arty and meaningful for you. And in light of what we talked about in, I think at the very top of the discussion here about how you have this whole PhD and they didn't teach you about grief. And it wasn't until you got personally involved in grieving that you started to, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, understand or I guess experience it in such a personal way.
Yeah.
So this The Art of Grief, and I think as we're talking here, it's February 2024. You have a group starting soon, I think.
Yes, it starts March 1st.
Aha. Okay. And so it's not too late to sign up if people are listening now, soon after the episode has come out?
It is not too late.
Okay, great. So I guess they just reach out to you through your website or something?
Yeah, they can go. There's a thing on itsnotabouttheart.com.
Okay.
And there's they can you can get get a free excerpt from my book and information about soul collage there, and you can apply to join the program if you're interested.
All right, great. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. And so it's what is it, just a few months, few weeks of a group of meeting virtually? Do you have to be in upstate New York, or kind of how does it work?
You can be anywhere located because it is online. Okay. And it is 10 sessions on Friday afternoons Eastern time. And except for 2 of them are Wednesday open studio times. And we do a different thing each week. You don't have to have any previous art experience at all. We're going to be doing stuff like this, like collaging and soul collage. And I mail you a box of art supplies.
Oh, so I don't even have to go to Michael's and
you
like
don't
look
even
for all the
have to
stuff.
go to Michael's. I mail you the supplies.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Cool. All right, great. Well, I encourage people to check that out if that sounds like something that would be interesting and useful. It sounds like a what's the word I'm looking for? Unique and different from like so some of the topics we've talked about in the show in the past. Books and grief groups and all kinds of things that there are a lot of terrific options. And this sounds like another good option that people should know about and consider. It never occurred to me before I started talking to grief people that like art and grief might go together.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just think that so much of grief is it's just different than you thought it was going to be. It's just such a visceral emotional experience. I mean, definitely part of it is sad, no doubt, but there's just so much about it that like until you're in it, you don't realize like how complex and multi-layered it is. And I think that art holds that so well. And also, art can help you access your own inner wisdom when you live in a culture that doesn't have a lot of wisdom to offer you around grief and death. So that's another reason why I love the expressive arts process and the writing and the collaging and the journaling, because you can access that inner wisdom that says, what are we even talking about? You should move on 1 year from now. Who even said that? Like, you should be where you are. You should be exactly where you are.
Right.
You're right where you need to be. It makes so much sense. That's where you are. First of all, that's where you are. So you might as well just be where you are. But
right.
Second of all, that is where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Cool. All right, great. Well, I will encourage listeners to check that out. And one more question: is it because we have moms and dads who listen to this show? Is this a group for women or is it for everybody?
Oh, that's a good question. This particular program is for women.
Gotcha. Okay, just wanted to make sure we don't send the wrong people your way. Great. Okay. And speaking of, well, I don't know what this is speaking of. You mentioned writing a moment ago. I wanted to mention that you've written an essay for the Widowed Parent Institute's online magazine. And so if you're listening now, the week that this is coming out, look on Friday for the essay from Linda. And it's about butterflies, and it's about the first anniversary of her husband's death. And I'll leave it at that for people to go check out what she has to share there. And that's, again, on our website at widowedparentinstitute.com. So good. Well, gosh, I think we could keep talking about this all afternoon. This, like I said, art is, I end up being exposed to a lot of it through my daughter, but personally, I don't, I guess, do that much in the art space. So this is super interesting to hear how it's relevant to grief and grieving people and how it can be a useful tool and approach and medium for processing and living and grieving. So I guess that was a long way of saying thank
profound.
you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so I always like to ask listeners, guests, at the end, one sort of wrap up question. If you could say one thing to newly widowed parents, what would you say?
I would say to give yourself so much more grace than you're giving yourself. Like, give yourself so much more grace than you're giving yourself. And I think that's true I think that's true for newly widowed. I think that's true for newly widowed parents. And I think that's true, like, as time goes on too. Like, it's just a hard road. And if I don't mean give yourself grace, like hang out in bed and eat chocolate all day. I mean, give yourself grace, like, this is hard. This is hard. And you're doing it. Like, cheerlead yourself, but in an authentic way,
Yeah.
Like, it's a hard path. It's a hard path and you're doing it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Dr. Linda Shanti McCabe, who's a widowed parent and a registered expressive arts therapist and more. So Linda, where can listeners find you if they'd like to learn more about your work and your Art of Grief program?
Great. They can go to itsnotabouttheart.com and just spell that out. No apostrophes or anything.
Uh-huh.
It's not about the art. And they can find me on Instagram at Grief and Art.
Okay, terrific. We'll put those in the show notes. And Linda, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Linda Shanti McCabe as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 149. And if you're finding the Widowed Parent Podcast helpful, please consider supporting the show. It's easy. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. That's buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. As always, thank you for listening. And until next week, remember, you've got this.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.